I love getting DMs or comments like this one. Eric, you're not funny or informative, and I don't know why people listen to your podcast. Or, Eric, I love the humor. It's not corny and just lighthearted enough to keep things insightful. Well, who's right? I have no idea. Let's get to it. Welcome. Another episode of IBF On Demand. I'm your self-deprecating, confused, and not so humble host, Eric Wilson. You can find me at eric@ibf.org. That's eric@ibf.org. Thanks for the follows. Thanks for the subscribes. Thanks for the comments, good or bad. Find me on LinkedIn, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts you're listening now or wherever you're listening to. I want to thank Arkiva, driving business transformation by solving what others cannot. Thanks, Arkiva, for being the sponsor of this as well. I do want to mention right now, we do have an upcoming conference in person coming up in October 18th through 21st. It's our flagship conference. We're back in Orlando. I'm excited to be back there in person, meeting people, shaking hands, kissing babies, whatever it is. It's a 4-day conference in actual. You got day one is a boot camp for members. If you're a member, come down, boot camp for you for free. Day two, 1 day leadership. It's for leaders. And then we have 2 days of forecasting, S&OP, subject matter experts, networking, fun. This is for everybody. It's an exciting conference. It's our flagship event. It happens every year in October. It's going to be coming back this October 18th through 21st in October in Orlando. Registration's open. Check it out, ibf.org, for that exciting conference coming up. Today, I want to talk about the new norm. I know I hate those terms. I hate that terminology. We're going to talk a little bit about the new norm. Things have gone virtual a lot more than what it should have, probably. And it's having an impact on people. It's having an impact on businesses, having an impact on S&OP processes. I actually am in the minority of this. I get this, which means I'm most likely wrong. I'm okay with that as well. But I think it's having a negative impact on S&OP. And I wanted to actually talk about how it's impacting our S&OP processes. Recently, I actually posted on LinkedIn a story about what the impact may be on S&OP. And I got a lot of feedback from people saying they didn't see the negative impact. So I said, I am in the minority here. Most people don't see this as a negative thing. They said they're already doing these things. They're being able to adapt easily. I may be the minority, but I wanted to talk about this with you, the audience, with a couple of actually experts who are doing S&OP processes, are familiarized with it. Let them present what they're seeing. I'll present what I see. So this is a true I report. You decide. We're going to have a discussion here on this new norm for S&OP and if there's an impact at all. My first guest is Andrew. Andrew's an award-winning sales and operations planning, demand planning, predictive analytics, risk management, S&OP, supply chain management professional. He's one of the world's few triple, quadruple, quintuple certified professionals between IBF and ASCM and the Center of Expansion for Designations. He's currently Global Supply Chain Transformation Lead with Ball Corporation. He's an advisor board member for the Institute of Business Forecasting Planning. He's a good friend and actually a prior guest as well. Help me welcome Andrew. So welcome, Andrew. I'm excited to have you back.
Hey, Eric. How you doing?
Doing good. So recently I put out on LinkedIn, hey, I think S&OP is going to suffer with this hybrid remote type of environment. And everyone disagreed with me except for you. So Since you're the only ally I had, and you're much smarter than I am, I figured I'd have you on, and you can help convince the audience that we're going to struggle with this environment that we're living in, not being sitting face to face anymore. S&OP is going to have a little bit of hurdles to get through. It doesn't mean we can't, just means we're going to have some hurdles. So are you actually seeing, I know, congratulations, by the way, from having the new baby on maternity leave, but when you are in S&OP process, are you seeing kind of a struggle in getting to this learning curve of being remote?
Yep. And we'll get to that. Like any good politician, you got to redirect. So first, thank you for the cue cards and the gift card to believe what you said on LinkedIn. I hope I followed the script. No, I'm just kidding. Just as usual, we see a lot of
the checks
things
in the mail, Andrew. The checks in the mail, Andrew.
So we could talk about what's happening and where we hope to see the players out there that are involved, that watch these podcasts, that participate in best practices, hopefully help shape it a bit. What active versus passive management. What I see on the passive side is that IBP, S&OP, SIOP as a process, just through nature of survivability, coming out of the pandemic days and a lot of bullwhip activity happening, is that it's still being relegated to a supply chain, supply-demand balancing function. As opposed to what many of us in the practice hope that it becomes, a C-suite led strategic deployment function, right? And process that when levers pull at the top, by the time they come back next time around, they've seen all of that retooling and they have options and decisions to make available. I always think of Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek Next Generation, where he sits around the table asking for options. That's what we aspire for. What I see passively happening in that balancing act is that if you're going to consider supply chain still being the leader, the owner of the process, again, in the survivability mode, is that supply chain folks are traditionally, in my experience, very INTJ, personality assessment type. And what happens when you get in that mindset is you shift into tactical mode. And it's all about work order management, PO releases, action messages, new exceptions, how long is the list growing, and then at the end of the day, hanging up the hat until you put it back on the next day. And unfortunately, we know that the human element suffers when you're that busy. That's why on the operations side, ramp up, a lot of time is spent in Six Sigma projects focusing on the way that the plant operates, right? And on our own side, on SIOP, we haven't necessarily taken that intentional forcing of time to manage process a little bit differently. So what I see, Eric, from that supply chain led side is that the ways of working have changed. Teams, WebEx, mind mapping, online collaborative documentation, a lot of different ways of doing things, but it's not been embedded and a conversation hasn't taken place within IBP to say, how has our day in the life changed? When this decision was being made in this forum, and now we're suffering what everyone is, and classic online meetings sort of folks don't participate, power players emerging, some webcams on, some off. These things you and I kind of chimed in on LinkedIn about. Those symptoms don't just impact normal meeting management. IBP is more than the forum, so it is still working, which is good, but it's taking a hit because those fallacies are coming into play and we're shrinking back into our INTJ hats and just trying to get through the grind.
I agree, and that's the reason I had you on, because I knew you'd be able to articulate the points much better than I would. If you're looking at S&OP, you mentioned if taking it outside of supply chain process, a business process, it's collaborations, consensus, and transparency. Studies have concluded that a lack of close contact hinders the formation of trust, connection. It has to then hinder that collaboration, that transparency, building the consensus. Studies are showing not being in close contact is hindering those relationships. It has to impact S&OP, then I'm thinking, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. So, every major company out there, and I'm sure even the mid caps and smaller ones are all fighting on this return to office, sort of practice. But you see a lot of leaders, right, because they're immersed in their business. They want to see the success of it. They're all in, right, showing up to the table. They're the ones asking everyone else to come back to find balance, right, because that's a big part of what the pandemic helped many of us in the workforce realize is how to find greater balance in your personal world. But at the same time, they're still showing up. How in the time I do spend in the work hat outside of the personal hat, how can I be the most effective? And to your point, it's taken a huge hit because now folks that before were able to collaborate interpersonally, decisions and influence, which is a huge word we talk about in the S&OP world and why it's such a great opportunity to be a part of it. How much of that takes place outside of a formal 8 to 10 a.m. demand review or supply review, and how much of that pre-work goes into it that now, you're lucky if you can catch somebody on instant message or Teams and get them to review something buried in their inbox. So there needs to be a very intentional focus on redesigning the day in the life. And what does it mean with digital collaboration tools? There's been a lot of ways that I've tried dabbling with that in my own IBP process, and we're finding things that work, but it's continuously evolving. But I'd say even in my own process, I take a great deal of pride in. This has taken us a step back.
Okay. You mentioned that, the getting people involved, and people might be less motivated in to respond or engage when you put them virtually behind a camera. Camera on or off, they may be less motivated to engage in the conversation. Now, full disclosure, there was one introvert that actually challenged me on this one. She told me that, and I respect her opinion, she's great, but she actually said that she's more apt to respond when she's on the other end of the camera, kind of that anonymity, not being in a room. But for the most part, I'm seeing people are having less motivated to respond when you put everybody remote. Is how do you get people to respond? Or are you seeing that problem as far as getting people engaged in a process when everybody's remote?
I think engagement is a challenge. There's all of the cordialities of being in business and just active listening and interpersonal, dynamics of, some people in a conference room might step over each other, but okay, you go first, then I'll come back, where, it's almost like a walkie-talkie in a WebEx, right? One person at a time, right? So then a lot of those kind of parking lot of ideas, people feel like, oh, I missed my opportunity. And you might lose things that should otherwise be a part of the conversation, be a part of the decision making. Look, power players are going to exist in both worlds, right? It can happen in a boardroom. It can happen in a WebEx. If you took a shot clock of who talks for how long, right, of every participant, I'm sure you're not going to find an even curve. You're going to find a classic Gaussian curve of where those power players reside. That, again, takes intentional management, team development, team dynamics, and coaching, right, to be able to make sure that folks have their voices heard. I will say one thing on the positive side is that there are so many digital collaboration tools out there now that I feel like it's almost become more accepted and commonplace to have pre-submissions, parking lots, put this on a WebEx hit list for the meeting, and that stuff is great, right? As long as you build skillful facilitators that circle back to those topics, right? I think when it comes to webcam on, webcam off, people speaking up, my opinion, right, as opposed to your previous guest, I think that most folks have not had active training in this space, the same as they would CPF training, right? To be able to understand, how do I overcome discomfort, of being able to speak over someone with a higher title that might be on the WebEx, or I can't read their body language. How much of what we learn about communication is the nonverbal, right? When is the right time? I pride myself as a coach of other IBP leaders to say one of the best soft skills you can have is a deft touch, right? How you say it, the way you interject it, not common to me, but being concise and being able to have a powerful statement. Those are all great skills of an IBP leader. And I don't see those things being facilitated in this new norm. I don't.
That's a great point. We're still learning some of those new skill sets. It's a great point. One more report I wanted to kind of highlight that kind of supports our side of the argument is another report about workplace politics. unfortunately, politics exist. They exist in even a good S&OP process. But what this study says is actually more pervasive and difficult now with conflicts arise, and it's harder to resolve them than it was before. And if you're looking at S&OPs, it's supposed to be healthy conflict. Before, you'd get up afterwards, you'd shake hands, you'd continue the conversation into the hallway. Now, camera goes dark and they're sitting in their room just stewing over what that other person said and thinking somebody else's doesn't have their back. These are real things that we have to kind of resolve in an S&OP process. That has to be a problem now as well.
You nailed it. I've even seen this with my own employer, and it's something that scares me a little bit. And I'm doing my best, right, as all of us do in this profession, to try to help persuade it. But I'm seeing, to your point, human collateral, sort of impacts right from the process of a lot of companies are seeing softening of demand, right? They may add, depending on the industry, kind of the peak of the bullwhip during, now you've got channel saturation and folks are buying less and the water levels are receding. And as they're dealing with that, right, versus the influx of cash in some spaces that came during the pandemic and post recovery, now that water levels are receding and you're seeing SG&A decisions and how much of that walks on two legs, right? Where normally, as you're balancing the supply and demand and supply curves, supply of human capital of that solution. HR, as you know, Eric, is part of a well-functioning IBP process, as is capacity from a human perspective. And I'm seeing decisions about demand supply from a widget balancing perspective. And then when that camera goes off, it's okay, now what are we going to do about the headcount reductions or the layoffs or the temporary layoffs? Those are things that if you start to take decision making out of the IBP process, there's just a massive reversal on the S&OP maturity curve. Folks that get to level 3, level 4 S&OP maturity, as you know, and IBF has a great maturity model on the website. I have referenced it frequently. It's not a one-directional curve that you grow and you stall. You can absolutely go the other direction. And I'm seeing the biggest impact be that the decision-making, to your point, is leaving the IBP forum in examples where it should live there. And the trust erosion, when you talk about employees leaving and mass exodus and how do you hold on to talent, the first way is have them feel empowered, have them feel part of the decision-making, right? Ollie White for years has said those in the S&OP function participating in the way the business runs are the future leaders of the business. Yeah. Not so much if you're not involving them in that decision making. So I'm with you, and it scares me when I understand business is business and decisions have to be made, but those have dramatic consequences on morale. And to not have IBP be aware, right? The most important thing you can do is have people aware, prepare, and it just feels like it's happening behind closed doors.
Okay, so now being devil's advocate there, so we kind of build our side of the argument. Being devil's advocate, what I'm hearing is S&OP has always, for most organizations, been a global. There's always been people remote because different regions. Now, with everyone being remote, it's allowing us to level the playing field for everyone, because before you had these people were on the phone call, everybody else was in a boardroom. Now everyone's on the same level. So it's actually promoting better collaboration, better communication, because everyone feels they're at the same level. Everyone's remote, opposed to having these 2 or 3 people out there being remote in this region. Are you seeing, from devil's advocate, is this a positive with it, or is there still negatives with that as well?
Yeah, I think there's definitely positives. I've been in both a regional capacity. I've worked in LATAM offices and EMEA offices, regions, led S&OP there as well as global. Right now, I happen to be on the global side. And look, I would say to those that claim that they have a global S&OP process, take a look at the D&I, from a count perspective of your teams. If you say we're a global S&OP team or global supply chain team, and you're 95% staffed with US-based talent, are you really a global S&OP team, right? So those are challenges that existed even before this new norm, Eric, of making sure that representation of all of your offices in the business, right? It could be proportional to revenue or footprint, however it makes sense for your business, but making sure that those teams truly are diversified. And the best functioning orgs, and I'm sure you'd advocate for this, right, with the services from the IBF, are that leaders, right, if this is the way they're running the business, should be immersed in their business. Are you traveling around and hosting your S&OP global forums in different locations? Are you creating town hall type environments where a WebEx, even in the global office in the States, let's say, right, is being run in a similar manner for view overseas as the same way you consume their information in kind of a WebEx format? I think it has, because companies haven't nailed that. It has helped propel it a bit. There's a positive silver lining, right? I have folks working for me all around the world, and they would tell you they now feel that the opportunities for growth are a bit more leveled than they were before.
Okay, so we got that one. Then the other argument I hear for it as well is because S&OP is now gone virtual, because there's more structure to it, because you're having more of the pre-leads and you're focused on the communication, it actually is more efficient than what it was prior. Before, kind of going, people could steer the conversation. Now you already have that structure to why you're there. You understand it. So it's created more efficiency to the S&OP process. Is this a byproduct of going virtual, or is that just, really grasping for, hey, we're trying to find a win here?
I think it's created the efficiency of capstone process meetings. So a classic portfolio management review, demand review, supply review, financial or integrated reconciliation, and an executive. The prep needed for those 5 key bubble up decisions. Certainly, I will tell you, I have more time to do prep work when people leave me the heck alone than I do when I'm in 8 to 5 meetings all day. Absolutely. So remote certainly helps create those pockets of time sometimes. But here's the downside. You have more to talk about in those executive forums because you're not doing, and I believe it's Ollie White that coins this phrase, the below the line work. So if that's the above the line capstone process, the below the line is your day in the life that feeds, exception management, intel gathering, plan retooling that feeds your weekly S&OE or, integrated process control, IPC, some people call it, or tactical control, that feeds that capstone process. And where I see the deficiencies, Eric, that are just shifting what bucket that amount of bolus of things to get solved is taking place in, is a lack of rigor on the collaboration on the first two. So, gotcha. I don't see, for example, and I love when I do see it, well-functioning Teams forums where there's stand-ups every day, where if you're in that digital space, people are sharing the information, scenario passing through many of the tools and technology that now offer that throughout the day, so that when you're prepping for those capstones, sure, let that be more efficient, and it is, because you've done more of the work beforehand. I would say now I'm seeing S&OP meetings be lengthened. I've talked to organizations out here in Denver where their S&OP cycle has gone from 4 to 6 weeks, simply because they can't get through those capstone 5 processes because so much has been moved up into them.
Wow. Okay. I got time for one more question. Whether, you and I agree on this and we're right, which of course we are, we're still in the minority. And like it or not, we still live in this new norm. We're going to have to adapt to life as we know it, with S&OP included. So my last question then is, those people that are trying to learn how to convert S&OP to the virtual or hybrid world, the people who are just starting S&OP processes that are in this new environment that we live in with technology and hybrid work, what's your real quick advice, 2 minutes, what's your advice to them to really make sure they don't do lessons learned, or make it successful?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think you and I are just honest, Eric, right? And in order to solve a problem, you have to say there's a problem first, right? So, but we're also extremely optimistic, which is something I've always appreciated from you, right? You're not seeing me over here saying the sky's falling. Here's what I'm seeing, right? And how are we trying to overcome that? I think that every part of the IBP process, every stakeholder involved, it's a give and take relationship, right? If it's just take, right, that's never going to work. When I talked about HR, right, and I'll paint that with a very broad sweeping stroke, right? Organizational design, talent management, skill development, all of these things. You're seeing a lot of skill-based activity, skill-based development being a buzzword out there. Well, one of the skills that we are needing to hone as much as we are R and Python and data sciences prep in the IBP world is the human element, right? And I think that being able to lean back on HR and say, don't just pay attention to this for the change in what we're projecting need to be the capacity or skill set or design of the future to support S&OP. Here's what we need in the skill-based activity. And really leaning on those experts and admitting this is not what IBP and supply chain professionals are the best at, right? And classically, in people, process, technology, and data, we jump right for process, tech, and data. And that other bucket is kind of left on its own. Admit that on the radar chart, we're not perfect. If we were, we'd be called marketing. No, I'm just kidding. They claim they are. But, what we're here to do is continuously learn and sharpen the saw, right? IBF asserts that. You and I are continuous learners. I'm spending a ton of my LinkedIn courses now, where a year ago it was more on data sciences, now focusing on team dynamics, focusing on personality assessments, different ways that you can build and learn to work within your team so that you're intentionally, going back to that word I said at the beginning, focusing on not just facilitation of a meeting, but are you creating forums outside of the meeting for ideation? Right, to continuously improve the process like manufacturing does well? Are you creating those micro Hoshians and Six Sigma projects where folks say, yeah, I think this part of the deck or this decision making or this part of our technology could be better? Involve those doing the job. Don't just leave it to management. And when it comes to HR, just be open. We need training in this space. Even if we're not seeing the effects that Andrew and Eric are seeing or worried about, it could happen. We don't want to see a reversal on the curve, and we recognize that a new variable has been added in. And we're not quite sure a year in or a year and a half in how this return to work, the new digital nature of work, is going to impact us. Help us build the skill sets we need so that everyone knows in a digital world, right, what takes place in this day in the life forum in this tool versus what takes place in a WebEx. And don't let it passively happen to you, or you'll end up with so much in that latter WebEx bucket, you won't get through it, and you'll see your S&OP process suffer.
Great advice and great way to end it. I want to thank you, Andrew, for being part of this. Hopefully some people listened and got something out of it. I'm sure they did. And I'm sure I'm going to have you on again. We're going to talk about a third topic in the future. I have to admit, I'm old. I have no social networks or friends or even life for that matter. These are my thoughts. My thoughts are we're having to see a negative impact on S&OP because of this new norm, because people aren't getting together. Even though the majority think there's no problem and there's no change, I think they're actually just lying to themselves. It's not intentional, but it's the easy button for S&OP. It's just going through the motions of the meetings and the process, and they don't understand the really true focus of it. I'm not calling everybody out saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that having this lack of face-to-face interaction has to be having a problem. We're all about collaboration, consensus, transparency. It's not just checking the box of a meeting. And if you're really looking at collaboration, transparency, I can't help but think, but not having those face-to-face interactions is causing an impact to S&OP processes. They say follow the science. They've been preaching that for 3 years, follow the science. I mean, yes, most of it's junk science, but we've been told to follow the science. Let's follow the science on this one. Recently published articles in the Journal of Nature and Human Behavior says it's harder to share information. You don't trust your coworkers as much. You're becoming more siloed, all because of this remote work. It's proven. You don't have those face-to-face interactions. You can't help but not build bigger bonds. When you're walking away from the meetings, you really still have the unsurety and mistrust of this. If we're building collaboration, building transparency, there's going to be issues if we don't do something proactively to help build those in the new norm. I want to continue to talk about that in the next podcast, and I hope you join me for the next one. Well, I hope you enjoyed this virtual podcast. My name is Eric Wilson. You can find me at eric@ibf.org. That's eric@ibf.org. Thanks to our sponsor as well, Driving Business Transformation by Solving What Others Cannot. If you want to be in person, if you want to actually get out of your bunker and come to an in-person conference, you're tired of this virtual stuff, October in Orlando, October 18th through 21st. We have our flagship conference for IBF. Check it out at IBF.org. It's a wonderful conference, 4 fabulous days, boot camp, leadership conference, 2 days of great content from some of the best experts from around the world, all the benefits of in-person networking, interaction, building long-term relationships, and insightful continuous learning all in one place in Orlando, October 18th through 21st. So please check it out, IBF.org. Check that out as well. And as always, as you're shaking hands, as you're interacting, don't forget, wash your hands.
As always, thanks again, Eric. And everybody, make sure you're signing up for all the great IBF resource and checking out demand-planning.com and all the good stuff. So thanks again, Eric. Joy to be here.
Thank you. See you in part 2 eventually.